Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. So let's talk about what we have here for you today. Quick question. Have you ever associated a single word with an entire country? Like, you can't see a bald eagle without thinking about the United States, right? Or maybe think of pizza and not think of Italy. Maybe the word technology immediately recalls visions of Japan. And yeah, I know these are all generalizations, but sometimes there's a ring of truth to them. Today, we're talking about a country that is so synonymous with one word that it's basically impossible to think of that word without thinking of them. And that word is neutrality. And if you thought about Switzerland, then you'd be absolutely right. For almost 500 years now, Switzerland has become the neutral country in the world. Through the most catastrophic conflicts in human history, they're just not there. Think about the Napoleonic Wars. Switzerland sits out. Well, okay, they were invaded by France in 1798 as France was looking to spread some revolutionary love, but that's the exception. In World War One, the Great War, where millions died across Europe, not in Switzerland. World War Two, literally the greatest catastrophe in human history. Switzerland was still neutral, even with Nazi Germany surrounding them on three sides. Before and since, they've become this haven of neutrality, the place where enemies meet to negotiate, the perfect neutral ground, the place of the Geneva Convention, peace treaties, international organizations, all of that's in Switzerland. But here's where it gets a little weird. Switzerland, it's also like super armed. Every able bodied man has to serve in the military. They are required. And when they're done with their service, they take their rifle home. They keep it in their house. The whole country is basically a standing army that just happens to have a day job. They make excellent chocolate and watches, both of which I enjoy thoroughly. And they also have shady financiers, which, if we're all being honest with ourselves, it's kind of true. Anyway, so how does that work? How do you become the most armed and most neutral at the same time? It's almost like being a pacifist who sleeps with a loaded gun under their pillow. The math doesn't seem to add up. Most people just assume that Switzerland was always like this, always neutral, because they're a mountain people, because they're isolated. They kept to themselves with their cheese and their cows and maybe their very precise clocks, right? Except 500 years ago, Switzerland wasn't neutral. Not at all. They were the opposite of neutral. They were Europe's mercenaries. They were the absolute scariest military force on the continent. In fact, when a king wanted to guarantee victory, he would hire Swiss soldiers. They were so good and so disciplined, so terrifying, that just having them on your side could end the war before it started. The Swiss would hire out to whoever paid the most, sometimes even ending up on opposite sides of the same conflict, which I'm sure led to some awkward moments and dinner conversations. But for 200 years, Swiss pike formations were basically unbeatable. Their whole economy ran on exporting violence. Young Swiss men grew up knowing their career path was being really, really good at killing people in organized formations, and cousin, business was a booming. And if you don't get the reference, then go watch Inglourious Bastards. It's a great movie. So what happened? How do you go from being Europe's most feared warriors to being its most trusted neutral party? That's not like an evolution. That's a complete identity transplant. And the answer isn't some gradual cultural shift that happened over centuries. It really comes down to one battle, one catastrophic day in 1515 when everything the Swiss believed about themselves just stopped working. And what they did next and how they handled that defeat created the Switzerland that we know today. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying the show and you like what we're doing, connecting the identity of nations to key moments and events that have shaped their DNA, please help the show by leaving us a rating wherever you listen. Written reviews work best, and they take around 30 seconds. The other thing you can do is you tell someone about the show, and if you do, maybe they'll tell someone else, and then so on and so forth. Helping the show grow gets us closer to the goal of weekly episodes, as I would be able to dedicate more time to the podcast. Also, if you are inclined to leave feedback, please drop us a line at doublehelixhistorypodcast@gmail.com. All feedback is good feedback in my eyes, and it is how we make the show better. And finally, if you think the show is good enough for maybe 3 of your hard-earned dollars, then please support us. Just click on the link in the show notes, and you will be able to donate and support the show there. Okay, that's out of the way. Let us proceed. We are in September of 1515 in a field near Milan. 20,000 Swiss soldiers are about to learn that invincibility doesn't last forever. And in that learning, they're going to accidentally invent modern Switzerland. What you are hearing is death marching. Not metaphorical death, actual death, organized into perfect rows, moving with mechanical precision through the Italian pre-dawn darkness. 20,000 Swiss pikemen, each carrying an 18-foot spear tipped with steel, advancing in formation so tight you could hear them breathing as one. If you're standing anywhere within earshot of this army, feel it in your chest before you hear it. That bass drum rhythm, thousands of men moving in lockstep. This is what military perfection sounds like. This is what 200 years of unbroken victories sounds like. And in about 36 hours, it is all going to be over. We are in Marignano, near Milan, on September 13th, 1515, at 5 a.m. Right now, in this moment before everything changes, these men don't know that. How could they? They are Swiss. They don't lose. That's not a boast, it's observable fact. For 2 centuries, Swiss pike squares have been the most feared military formation in Europe. Knights flee rather than face them. Armies surrender when they hear the Swiss are coming. Kings pay fortunes just to have them on their side. Johannes Kessler, a 23-year-old pikeman from Zurich, marches in the 3rd rank. His grandfather fought at Nancy in 1477, where Swiss pikemen destroyed Charles de Bolz's Burgundian army. His father fought at Novara in 1513, where they crushed a French force twice their size. Now is Johannes' turn to uphold the family tradition of being really good at stabbing people in organized ways. By tomorrow night, he tells the man beside him, we'll be drinking French wine in Milan. His friend laughs. It's not optimism, it's a calculation. This is what they do. This is what they've always done. 36 hours later, Johannes Kessler will be one of 3,000 Swiss dead soldiers in the fields around Marignano. His body will lie in an Italian field, surrounded by thousands of others. Testament to the day Swiss invincibility died. That artillery thunder that you hear in the distance, that's the future arriving, and the Swiss aren't ready for it. This is the Swiss accident. Marignano, 1515. You know how they say you can't understand someone until you walk a mile in their shoes? Well, I'd argue you can't understand a nation until you've walked through its history. Not just the highlight reel or the sanitized version you find in textbooks. I mean really getting into its DNA. Those defining moments that shaped everything that came after. Those moments where paths were chosen, where decisions were made in palaces and backrooms and city streets that changed the course of millions of lives. I'm your host, Paul, and this is Double Helix, Blueprint of Nations, where we unravel the genetic code of countries through their most transformative moments. Think of it like ancestry testing, but for entire nations. We dig deep into the historical DNA, finding those crucial moments that made countries who they are today. To understand what's about to happen at Marignano, you need to understand what Switzerland actually was in 1515. And I promise you, it's not what you think. Picture the Alps in the late Middle Ages, not the postcard mountains with ski resorts and chalets. Picture brutal, isolated valleys where winter means 6 months of near starvation, where the growing season is so short that one bad harvest means death. Small communities clinging to mountainsides, cut off from the world, united by exactly one thing. They absolutely refuse to be ruled by the Austrian Habsburgs. The problem is, independence and poverty don't play well together. These valleys can't support large populations. The soil's terrible. The winters are savage. Farming barely keeps people alive. So what do when you got too many young men and not enough land to feed them? We are going to the Morgarten Pass in Switzerland, December 15 of 1315. What you do with those young men is you export them. Except the Swiss discovered that they had a particular gift, that they were terrifyingly good at killing people in organized ways. It started almost by accident. A small force of Swiss peasants armed with pikes and axes waits in the narrow mountain pass as an Austrian army advances. The nobles, in their expensive armor, don't see the ambush coming. They get pulled off their horses and butchered. It was brutal, but it was effective, and it taught the Swiss something crucial. Infantry could beat cavalry if they had discipline and the right weapons. So they perfected it. The pike, 18 feet of ash wood tipped with steel, became Switzerland's primary export. Not cheese, not watches, and not chocolate, not yet, but death, delivered with mechanical precision. Here's what made the Swiss pike formation revolutionary. They fought like a single organism. In an era when most armies were basically armed mobs, the Swiss drilled endlessly. They moved in perfect coordination and maintained formation under any pressure. Picture a pike square. 5,000 men, bristling with spears on all sides. From a distance, it looks like a massive porcupine. Up close, it's your worst nightmare. The pikes are layered, front ranks level, back ranks angled upwards, creating an impenetrable forest of steel. Now, imagine being a French knight. You've trained your whole life for war. Your armor costs more than a village makes in a year. You're on a war horse bred for size and aggression. You're supposed to be the ultimate warrior. And then, you charge at what looks like a forest of spears and watch your horse impale itself. The formation doesn't break. It actually advances towards you while you're trapped in a dying cavalry and screaming of men. Your expensive armor just made you a slow-moving target. That's what fighting the Swiss meant, and they cultivated their reputation for ferocity. They didn't capture enemies, they executed them. Surrendering forces were given no quarter. The message was clear. Hire the Swiss and win. Fight the Swiss and die. By 1500, every major European power wanted Swiss mercenaries. They all paid massive sums to have Swiss pike squares in their side. And the Swiss? They took contracts from whoever paid the most, including opposing sides in the same war. This, of course, created bizarre situations. Two Swiss contingents facing each other on opposite sides of a battlefield. They're countrymen, sometimes relatives. So what do? They negotiated. They compared contracts, discussed which side was paying better, and one contingent would withdraw. It was always business, never personal. But think about what this does to a society. Your economy runs on exporting violence. Your young men grow up knowing their career is selling military skill to foreign powers. Your villages survive on the money sons sent home from foreign wars. This was Switzerland in 1515. Not neutral, not peaceful, aggressively militaristic, thoroughly invested in perpetual European warfare, because warfare was their business model. Swiss mercenaries were everywhere. They guarded the Pope, and they still do. The Swiss Guard at the Vatican. They fought for France, then against France, then for France again, depending on the contract. But here's the problem with building your entire identity around being the best at something. What happens when the technology changes? When your advantage evaporates? When someone figures out how to beat you? That's where we're headed, to a battlefield near Milan, where 20,000 Swiss soldiers are about to discover that invincibility has an expiration date. Northern Italy, September 1515. Italian politics is its usual chaotic masterpiece at this point. City-states fighting, foreign powers intervening, alliances shifting weekly. The Swiss have been right in the middle of it, fighting for Milan, then against Milan, collecting territory and treasure. But now there is a new player who's changing the game. Francis I has just become King of France. He's 20 years old, desperate to prove himself, and he's got his eyes on Milan. More importantly, he's got something new. Artillery. Really good artillery. And lots of it. The Swiss think they know how to handle cannons. Their tactics have always worked. Advance fast, hit hard, close the distance before artillery can do real damage, and shred enemy formations with pike squares. Speed and aggression, overwhelming firepower. It worked at Granson against the Germans. It worked at Murten against the Burgundians. Why wouldn't it work again against the French? Here's what they don't fully grasp. Francis's artillery isn't the slow, clumsy bombards that they're used to. These are mobile cannons with crews who've been drilled to reload faster than anyone thought possible. And Francis has studied Swiss tactics. He knows exactly what's coming. On the evening of September 13, the Swiss make camp near Marignano. They're tired from marching all day, but they're confident. Tomorrow they'll sweep the French aside like they've swept aside everyone else for 2 centuries. Hans Waldmann, the younger, a company commander from Bern, writes home to his wife that night. "Tomorrow we finish this business with the French," he writes. "Then I'll be home for the harvest." He'll never make it home. His body will be found 3 days later, crushed beneath his death horse. Marignano, September 14, 1515. The battle begins before dawn on September 14th. The Swiss advance in their traditional formation, moving fast, trying to close the distance. And at first, it looks like it's working. The formation smash into the French infantry with devastating force. French units break. Cavalry wheels away from the bristling spears. For the first few hours, it looks like Marignano will be just another Swiss victory. But then, the artillery finds its range. Here's what the Swiss haven't internalized about artillery. It's not just about killing individual soldiers. It's about the mathematics and the psychology. Each cannonball that crashes through a pike square doesn't just kill who it hits. It opens gaps in the formation. And Swiss power depends entirely on maintaining formation. You can't disperse. The whole system requires staying packed tight. You can't charge fast enough to escape when you're in formation carrying an 18-foot pike. You just have to advance through it and hope. The French do something also unexpected. Their cavalry doesn't charge the pike squares head-on. That is suicide. Instead, they harass the flanks. They prevent maneuvering. They keep the Swiss in the artillery kill zone. It's not brilliant tactics, it's just combined arms warfare. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery working together. But the Swiss have spent 200 years perfecting tactics for medieval armies. They are now fighting a Renaissance army with medieval methods. Giovanni de' Medici, commanding Italian infantry with the French, watches and writes later. They come on with such courage that one almost pities them for the slaughter that they're walking into. They maintain formation even as entire ranks are swept away. But courage without adaptation is just another word for suicide. The battle lasts 2 days. Not because it's close, because the Swiss just won't retreat. They can't retreat, psychologically. Their entire culture is built on never backing down, never showing weakness, never giving ground. To retreat is to admit that 200 years of victories was just luck. On September 14, both armies camped on the field. The Swiss have lost thousands, but they're still formed up, still ready. In every previous battle, this is when the enemy withdraws, when the Swiss determination wins. But on September 15th in the morning, the French are still there. Fresh French forces arrived overnight, more artillery positioned in the darkness, and the Swiss commanders realize something unthinkable. They are going to lose. The withdrawal is orderly. Even in defeat, Swiss discipline holds. But the psychological damage is catastrophic. 3,000 dead, thousands wounded, and for the first time in 2 centuries, Swiss pike squares have been definitively, publicly, humiliatingly beaten. News travels fast, and within weeks, every court in Europe knows. The Swiss are not invincible anymore. Artillery can break their formations. Their prize, in money and fear, just crash. The immediate military consequences are significant, but the long-term psychological consequences, they are going to reshape Switzerland forever. Zurich Town Hall, October 15, 3 weeks after Marignano. Hans Steiner from Zurich stands up. He's 40, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, and he is furious. For 200 years, we've been the best. One battle and we're supposed to give up everything? Across the chamber, Wilhelm Tell, yes, a descendant, shakes his head. You're not listening. It's not about one battle. Artillery has changed warfare forever. Our tactics are obsolete. We can adapt or keep dying for foreign kings while they laugh at us. This conversation is happening in every Swiss valley, every town hall, every family dinner. Their entire economy is built on mercenary service. Their reputation depends on military excellence. Their young men's future depends on foreign wars. And suddenly, all of it is in question. Some want to double down, adapt to artillery, prove Marignano was a fluke. Swiss mercenaries will continue serving in foreign armies for centuries. They're still good. They're just not invincible anymore. That changes everything. Others see the bigger picture. Switzerland is a small collection of cantons surrounded by major powers. France to the west, the Holy Roman Empire north and east, Italian states south. When Switzerland was Europe's military powerhouse, that wasn't a problem. But now, here's a geographic reality that suddenly becomes critical. Switzerland sits at Europe's crossroads. The Alpine passes are crucial for trade and military movement between Italy, France, and Germany. Every major power needs access through Swiss territory. Before Marignano, the Swiss dictated terms because everyone feared them. After Marignano, they need a new strategy. And this is where the Swiss show their real genius. Not in military tactics, that's obsolete now, but in strategic thinking. They look at their situation and they ask, how do we turn geographic vulnerability into diplomatic advantage? The answer emerges gradually, but the seeds are planted immediately. Instead of being Europe's most feared warriors, they become Europe's most reliable neutral ground. Instead of exporting violence, they export stability. You're asking a warrior culture to give up war. You're asking a society that's defined itself through military prowess for 2 centuries to find a completely new identity. You're asking people whose economic model is based on selling violence to instead profit from not taking sides. But the Swiss have something working in their favor. They are pragmatists. Mountain people always are. You don't survive in the Alps by being ideological. You survive by adapting. Mercenary service does not end immediately, but Swiss foreign policy starts shifting. When European powers go to war, Switzerland gradually stops taking sides. When trade routes need protection, Swiss neutrality becomes valuable precisely because everyone trusts them not to favor anyone. Within a few generations, the transformation is complete. Warrior culture becomes diplomatic culture. Mercenary economy becomes banking economy. Aggressive posture becomes neutral stance. And it works. Switzerland becomes prosperous, stable, influential, not through military might, but through carefully maintained neutrality. By the religious wars of the 1600s, Switzerland isn't picking sides. By the Napoleonic Wars, Swiss neutrality is a recognized principle. By World War I, it is so established that even total war swirls around Switzerland without pulling it in. But that discipline, that precision, that organizational skill that made them feared on the battlefields, it does not disappear. It gets rechanneled. Fast forward to the 20th century. 2 world wars remake Europe. Empires collapse. Borders are redrawn. Ideologies clash. And Switzerland? Switzerland stayed neutral. This isn't easy. Staying neutral during World War II when you're surrounded by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy takes more than declaring neutrality. It takes careful diplomacy, military deterrence, economic utility, and importantly, moral compromise. The Swiss allowed German trains through their territory. They buy gold from the Nazis, gold stolen from occupied territories, from concentration camps. They turn away Jewish refugees at the border. Thousands who could have been saved died because Switzerland chose neutrality over mercy. This is not Switzerland's proudest moment. The Swiss will spend decades grappling with this legacy, compensating victims, acknowledging complicity, trying to reconcile neutrality with justice. But they never abandon neutrality itself. By the 20th century, it is too valuable, too central to Swiss identity, too economically profitable. Geneva becomes home to the International Red Cross, founded by Swiss humanitarian Henri Dunant, the European UN headquarters, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, and countless peace negotiations. All possible because Switzerland, starting with pragmatic calculations after Marignano, built a reputation for neutrality so solid that even global conflicts couldn't shake it. So here's the thing about Switzerland. They did not plan this. Marignano was an accident. It wasn't some grand strategy. They got beaten, plain and simple. And then they had to figure out what to do about it. And that's what makes this story matter. Every country, every organization, every person eventually faces a moment when what made them successful stops working. When their advantage disappears. When the world changes and they have to decide whether to adapt or keep pretending nothing's different. Most societies choose denial. They double down on what worked before, convince themselves that trying harder will bring back the glory days. Spain kept building galleons after the naval warfare moved on. The Ottomans kept training cavalry after machine guns made cavalry suicide. But Switzerland? They looked at Marignano and asked, what else can we be? The answer: neutrality, precision, reliability, being where everyone else can meet. That wasn't a step down, it was something more durable than military dominance could ever be. Military power is always temporary. There's always better weapons, better tactics, more soldiers. But diplomatic trust, that can last centuries if you protect it. When circumstances change, you can choose to change with them, but successful change isn't about abandoning who you are, it's about finding new ways to be yourself. Switzerland today is still recognizably Swiss, still organized, precise, and disciplined. But they took those traits and built something that works in a world where being the best at organized violence isn't valuable anymore. Every nation eventually faces its own Marignano, some moment when what made them special becomes obsolete. The question isn't whether that moment comes, it's what do you do when it arrives? That's the Swiss accident. Sometimes the worst thing that happens is also the best thing. Sometimes defeat is just opportunity wearing camouflage. Sometimes the day everything falls apart is the day you figure out who you really are. Next time on Double Helix, we're starting a 4-part series on Haiti. We're going to August of 1791, the richest colony in the world, 500,000 enslaved people, and a revolution that will change everything. The only successful slave rebellion in history, the world's first black republic, and the price they paid for their freedom, that price still echoes today. So until next time, thank you for listening. We will see you soon.